I don't know which way these AirPods are supposed to fit. They're supposed to fit vertically down in your ear. Or they're supposed to fit towards your mouth. Some people I've seen them. It's like this.
That's hey, when you tilt it forward though like that, you look like Will Ferrell from that Saturday Night Live skit when he's like,
Little phones.
"Hold on."
I just was playing because I love the game. Like, and it's scary to me.
It's really easy for the game to become a job.
Low six in his hands, and whistle in his mouth.
Man, kids out there playing the game, staying out of trouble, competing. I love it. All right. So I have a story that will remain nameless, right? Or I guess anonymous. But it brings up an interesting situation that I wanted to get your perspective on. So a coaching buddy of mine, he he's connected to the basketball program, still kind of at arm's length where he's at, but they're in a little bit of a situation. They kind of played themselves into like a winner go home going into this last week of district, and he's leaving church today. He goes to church at the same place as the head basketball coach, and as they exit church, they hear like through the crowd, like, "Hey, coach, you go here too?" And he turns around, and it's a kid from an opposing school that dropped 25 on him Friday night in a district basketball game. And this guy's sitting there like biting a hole in his lip because he's still frustrated at how they played in that game. But also like, this is a great kid, and like he's being super respectful at church and whatnot. Yeah. Like, I'm just curious about your interactions with opposing kids, not coaches, but opposing kids, like post competition into the real world.
Well, I think it's different here because, obviously the transfer aspect of it here is so much different than Texas. So like when we first got here at Lipscomb, remember we have trainers here that they train all the time in our indoor, and CPA was a big time rival at the time.
And who is that CPA?
It's Cross Presbyterian Academy. It's basically a school down the road. Really good school. Head coach is unbelievable. And, they win state all the time. And at the time they had been beating Lipscomb, every year for a long time. So there's really bad blood there. And I do remember that our strength coach at the time, I'll keep his name out of it, made a comment to one of the trainers and was like, "What are you doing? Why are you training those kids to get better at our facility? It makes zero sense." And I could see both sides to it because, like, as the trainer part of it was like, well, no, like these people like this, I've been training here for 5 years. They're paying me to train them. It just happens to be in your facility. But then I can see our strength coach side of it like, no, like this is a competition part of it. Where Dilfer was very interesting, his aspect and his perspective of it was like, no, everything is recruiting. So if they can come here and they like our facility, they see that we're a welcoming staff, that we are a competitive staff and very knowledgeable staff, they might end up wanting to transfer here. So in every encounter you have with an opponent or an opponent's kids, it is a chance to recruit. And that was kind of his perspective, which like it made sense. So that's kind of how we took it.
So how did you what did that change when it did get on the field? Do you feel like you knew opposing rosters better because you saw them in those training sessions in the off season?
Well, okay. So there was a year there, actually 2 years, where people in this community were upset with me because I was training CPA's quarterback. So like, there's a lot of people not happy, and like, it's not bad anymore because we've moved divisions. Now they did move up this year, so there could be bad blood again. But like, the bad blood between CPA and Lipscomb at the time was insane. I mean, people that are 60 that just, I don't like that person over there. It's just like, what did they do to you? Like, and so anyway, I started training that quarterback, and he's an unbelievable kid, unbelievable family. And, but to me, it was like, no, this is a different part of the business. This is not Coach TK as the Lipscomb coach. This is Coach TK as the quarterback trainer. But there was a lot of bad blood, and I had to go to Dilfer about that. And I was like, hey, before I start doing this, like, how should I handle it? And he was like, man, again, it's recruiting. Like at the end of the day, he may have a younger brother that wants to now come here because he sees how good of a trainer you are. Um, so, and again, I wouldn't expect that type of answer from a lot of people, but that's kind of the unique way that Dilfer thinks, and a little bit different in Texas because it's like unless they physically move for non-athletic purposes, it's like they can't transfer there.
Right.
So, but
And
yeah,
that's like I always felt like the interactions, if you ever interacted off the field with like an opposing school's player in a sense that like you recognized each other, then there was probably a non-sports related relationship already
mm-hmm.
forming or
Yeah,
some sort of connection. Or that kid's like, high school kids. Like when I was in high school, 90% of the time we just pretended our coaches didn't operate in public. They just went
yep,
home and like plugged in and shut. They were like cyborgs, right? So if
mm-hmm.
there's that interaction, it's completely different. What I would say is that one of the things that I tried to pride myself on early in my career, being in Salina, being in that northern corridor of the Metroplex, like you see a lot of great athletes. And like I never claimed to like be the recruiting coordinator guru by any means. Like I had countless conversations and times I've tried to lean on you, like how do I approach this? How do I word this,
Mm-hmm.
etc. But if a kid went to a different school, as soon as we were done competing against them for like that calendar season, whatever it was, man, I'm trying like if I run into that kid, I'm trying to be intentional in conversation. Like, hey man, have you talked to this person? Do you follow this person on Twitter? What's your plan? What are your goals? What do you want? And that was the only time I ever really had interaction with them was me trying to find a way to help them. And it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have, you know, yeah, you'd love and pipe dream and be like, oh man, this coach was great. Like, let's move this lineup. But like that was an extreme result that I was very aware was most likely never going to happen.
Like you weren't
And,
doing it because you were hoping that was going to happen.
right. Like if
Yeah,
Jabray Young after his freshman year was like, man, Coach McLean was really nice to me after those track meets and get me in touch with those guys from Tulsa. Like, let's move to Salina. Like that was not the goal. If Jabray Young walked in and was like, I want to wear orange and white, I'd have been like, sick, let's go. But
yeah,
that was never the motivation. And to me, if a kid, especially a high school kid, if a kid's got enough like cojones to walk up to a coach, win, lose, or draw in competition, like, hey, coach, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Like, man, major kudos to that kid. Like, because, like I said, there were a lot of times when I was 16, if you catch a glimpse of, the defensive coordinator out at dinner, you just like, hey, could we sit at the complete opposite end of the restaurant, please? So
yeah.
we don't have to interact because, he's not supposed to be in public. That's kind of against the rules type thought process. So I just thought it
Coach,
was interesting. I know those coaches that are connected to that story, like they're probably going to be annoyed that I brought it up. But I felt like it was an interesting interaction because
mm-hmm.
I've never had one in that situation. But I have had interactions with opposing kids that I felt like more often than not, they're positive these days. Right. It's
Mm-hmm.
very few and far between where, a kid from a rival school is going to run up on you and try and like challenge you in some
Right.
way and bring the competition like testosterone levels to,
Yeah.
Brookshire's. So,
Yeah. I'll say this though, Coach Lee has a really interesting approach too. It's not interesting; it's just common sense, and that is lacking these days with a lot of people. But um, his take on it is like obviously when you're within the confines of the game, and you're going against the opponent, always work to the line, but never step over the line, right? But his whole thing was like the respect and appreciation that you should show to every single opponent before and after the game should be impeccable because without that person, you don't have the opportunity to compete. And he always made sure, yeah. I mean,
bars.
it's dude. He is such a just Socrates and Epictetus type of guy. But just the way to see that, I'm like, and we were all kind of like, you're right. Like, we can hate this person all we want, but at the end of the day, if that person doesn't show up, um, we can't go out there and express what we want to express in our sport. And so it makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that's a viewpoint that, or like that's verbalizing it in a way that you don't think about. But, football is such an interesting sport in the sense that you practice so much more than you play.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so necessary to do all those things because you're preparing for a million different what ifs.
Yeah.
Whereas in these other sports, volleyball, basketball, baseball, softball, you're playing a whole lot more. And so you're seeing these in-game situations a whole lot more from the time you start playing. So those situations and those memories, you can recall them all the way up. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
you could be 20 years old and a redshirt junior and or redshirt sophomore, and you're on the football field and you see a situation that is completely foreign to you that you have to respond to because of how many fewer snaps and how many fewer games you play compared to these other sports. And because I feel like the evolution cycle and how much the game is attempting to evolve constantly, that
Yep.
these new situations are coming. I mean, look at what game was it where they almost gave a touchdown. It was an NFL playoff game. The refs almost they gave a warning because offense was down on the goal line, and I can't remember the teams, and somebody's gonna call me out for it. Offense was down on the goal line, and it might have been the Philly Commanders game, and they were about to tush push, and so a guy on the Commanders defense kept trying to time the snap and jump over the pile because what are you sacrificing, an inch on the half the distance of the goal? And they did it so many times that the refs gave him a warning and said, if it happens again, you'll be rewarded a touchdown. Like they won't even have to try anything. It'll just be there was some long verbiage to describe it, but it's like I had never heard of that situation, and the vast majority of but apparently it's been a
Yeah.
rule since like 1942, but nobody's ever come across it because it's never been something that was realistically ever close to being enforced until last weekend. So, like I say all that to say that football creates these situations that can be so unique to either the player or to the game in general that it creates that practice play balance being so different
Right.
that it can create more of those tenuous moments
Mm-hmm.
that could potentially spill over. But
Right.
I digress.
It's good.
One thing that I wanted to talk to you about because I feel like the last couple of weeks, we've talked about I hate the overuse of the fact of the word culture, right? But we've talked a lot about the developmental side of like coaching and sports and all those things and everything that Tom Brady touched on in his Hall of Fame speech, like do hard things because it makes you a
Yeah.
better person. We've touched on that a lot. But like at the end of the day, we coach in a completely different generation now and like mentality now than we did, 12 years ago when we met. And you've got to be able to provide both. It's very few and far between I would say Larry Hill's like the last of a dying breed that can just, you know, this is how we've always done it from like a structural standpoint. I would say he's
Mm-hmm.
evolved conceptually, but this is how we've always done it from a structural standpoint and still be successful. And I think that those unicorns, they exist, but it's fewer and fewer.
Right.
And there's a branding aspect and a marketing aspect and a piece to the game that didn't exist 10 to 12 years ago that we have to be cognizant of as the long-term, like next up generation in the profession. So, and I know that you and Dilfer did a lot of different things when you first got there and some of them have continued, some of them haven't, but like, how have you in those relationships, or even when you were at Vandy, like how have you balanced that like branding marketing aspect with like, hey, but we also have to make you not be a terrible person?
Yeah. Well, I think that comes back to in which order do you put those first? And some schools decide to put the marketing first, and that's when they screw themselves. You put the relationship first, and then once you do that, you can, in my opinion, you can do whatever you want afterwards, so long that you have that relationship established. You know, Dilfer obviously is a big marketing guy. Now he showed all those kids by doing hard things and making them uncomfortable and doing it with them in the fire, how much he loved them. And then after that, the marketing came, afterwards. There is a lot of marketing things we have at Lipscomb, in my opinion, that are very unique. So, like, for example, and you and I were talking about this before the podcast, but like we have some trainers here that train at our indoor. One of them is an alumni. Um, he's been here for a long time training, and the people that he trains, obviously, they're pretty well known. I mean, he went from training basically three kids to training George Kittle. Um,
He's pretty good.
he's good. Yeah. He's a guy that now does tight end U, right? And so I say I had to say a big piece of marketing that you could say inadvertently happened for Lipscomb was him, and now all of his company. When you walk into our indoor, like as of right now, you're going to see the Texas tight end. Um, I think the Gunnar Helm. You're going to see the Texas tight end. You'll see the Ole Miss tight end. Um, you will see the Virginia tight end, and there's another one as well. Texas Tech. You're going to see those guys, and that's a small piece of who they train all day long. And I say that to say, like when we tour kids here, um, we try to intentionally bring them when all these things are happening in the indoor, because that's a pretty cool and tangible thing to see as you're walking in the indoor. It's like, oh my gosh, look at the work these guys are putting in with these trainers that are at Lipscomb. It's a very unique thing to have, but that's a huge piece of the marketing to me. Um, and one of the guys is a Lipscomb alum, so like he actually cares about Lipscomb. And so the cool thing that we have is like I've seen countless times where it's him or some of his workers that are talking to our kids about life, about the Bible, about different types of things. And so you have these trainers that um, train our kids, help our kids for free, train people throughout the day, train NFL guys throughout the day. And so to me, that's a pretty big intangible piece of marketing that we have here. And that's just one of many. But you have to have those. I will go back to your point, Travis, with Larry Hill. I'll put him in the thing or in the category with Nick Saban. It's almost like those guys have stuck to what they do, and this is what we do, and this is why we do it, and we've done it for so long that old school mentality is their marketing.
I mean,
It's interesting,
you know this. But Salina was the same way, right? Like
right?
tall white
Right.
socks, no black, no like clean shaven. And I've had countless conversations with Coach L, and he's like, I don't judge people. Like if you are a coach and
Right.
you have facial hair, I don't look down on you. This is just
Right.
the standard that was put in place. And what it is this is the way that we know our kids have put the program above themselves. And,
Mm-hmm.
there are situations where you allow a kid's personality to come out and whatnot, but their freedom to do that comes through the fact that you've already seen them do all this other stuff,
Yeah.
right? You've seen them not trying to come out to practice in ankle socks, and you've seen them, take their earrings out when they walk in the field house, and you've seen them, make sure that they're clean shaven before they walk into class. You've seen them do all those things. So if a kid jumps up after a big gain and points first down and, or pops his jersey, like not that big of a deal, right? And those standards aren't put in place because this is the only way to do things. This is just how we do things. And we have a measurement of what these things reflect for us. And I think that it works in, like you said, those type of places. What we have to do as paths go and careers go is find the balance. I think like right now, and I hate for it to just sound like, oh, we just talk to the kids a lot. Like that's not, I used to
Yeah.
think that was really powerful. And then I quickly realized that teenagers forget 80% of what they hear. Right. How can you implement like an off-season workout to reinforce these relational developmental, like be a good person
Mm-hmm.
ideas? And it's challenging the kids to lead, like a post-workout talk. It's putting a word attached to this station versus that station. It's
Mm-hmm.
doing all of those things. And then you can, once, like you said, if you put that first, I think Dilfer used to call it like that's, then you can start to focus on your sizzle, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you can have your flash and, your highlight reel and your hype video and, this short form content and photo shoots and things of that nature. Because I think that those are important, especially in Texas's legislature is looking at a voucher system and potentially a one-time transfer rule, which is a whole nother can of worms. But as those things, those aren't like conversations that people wave away like flies, right? They're starting to have sticking power, and you're having to be able to legitimize the defense against, right? Like, let me lay out the reasons that this is a bad idea from a kid standpoint, and then from a sports standpoint.
Yeah.
But if you're having to have those conversations, you better adapt to being able to provide some aspect of that without it taking away from that developmental side. But
Yeah.
you do have to provide some aspect of that. And
Right.
I think it's something that it's gonna it's gonna show a clear, like, not a changing of the guard, but there's going to be programs that don't adapt with that, and you're gonna see once consistently top 10 programs fall maybe down into like the mid 20s, which to a lot of people may not sound like a lot, but when somebody has spent, when you've lived in a town that's been in the top 5 for 20 years and now they're the top 25, you're going to be sitting there going, what the heck happened?
Right. No, that's good. This is an interesting topic. I feel like, and I want to talk about it some more. I was listening to a psychologist the other day, and they were talking about how many times do you converse with somebody about a topic that you're interested in? You give your points, you move on, you finish a conversation, and then you actually start thinking about what you really would want to say, and then your wheels actually start turning. You're like, dang, I wish I would have said that. I wish I would have said that. So as you start talking about this type of stuff, my wheels start turning more. Um, so like not to ramble about it all, but like to me, and you brought it up, there is like the balance of like substance versus sizzle. And it's almost like, you better have two substance and then every one sizzle. And the moment that starts to kind of like, outweigh each other is the moment you start to kind of go downhill. Um, I do think as like young coaches, obviously I'm not a head coach, but I feel like as a young head coach, in today's world, you would feel like you have to have like, how many, I need this acronym here. I need my stamp on this. And I need this type of saying here. And then these are going to be our covenants. And I feel like you almost feel like you have to have that stuff. One thing that we did here with Dilfer, he did have one like slogan. And I do think that is important when you get to a program. Like, what is your stamp? And like ours was be set apart. And what we did is we actually put that on every one of our clothing to that way if you're buying like a Lipscomb shirt, if it doesn't say be set apart, it ain't football. So that was kind of a genius on his part. And now anytime you see be set apart, it's almost like there's a subconscious like, oh, that's the Trent Dilfer era. But he did have that. But when I brought up like, what do you want to, what signing do you want to have in the locker room? What branding do you want to have here? And he's like, how about we just let it be organic and let the team almost bring that to fruition itself? I thought that was pretty interesting. I do feel like once you get in there, the first thing you want to do is let's put these brands here and this here and this here. I think as a young coach, it's best to, what is your stamp? And then let the marketing be how well that you coach and love those kids. And then eventually the best marketing will come out of that. The moment you start trying to make your marketing be something external, not internal, is the moment that you will have no external influence.
Yeah, I think that's you limit your reach. If you try and make your branding come from solely you, it'll reach some kids, but it won't reach as many as if
Right.
like first few days in Mount Vernon, like I was like, hey, you guys work. Like, do what you've been doing. It's the middle of the week. I'm just a guy that's here. If I'll talk to kids as they come up, but like keep doing the lifts that you're doing, the warm ups you're doing, the stations you're doing. I just want to watch. I want to see how people move, whose voice is loud, who's looking for a direction. I just want to see that kind of stuff. And since that happened, when we kind of flipped the switch, like, okay, turn left, new direction, here's where we're going. I've implemented like what I would consider like one saying, and it's simply to start to bring consistency, right? It's not like, hey, this is us. It's just like this is step one, right? Everybody sounds the same. Everybody moves the same. This is step one. And my plan is everything from now until any type of signage or wraps or t-shirts, anything of that is still going to come from me watching and seeing what kids say, who leads, who steps up, who does this, who does that, because that's where I'm going to get, more organic message that is not just me walking out of my office being like, all right, guys, 2025 season is, the theme is boom, right?
Yeah.
It's not, hey, this is what you guys have continued to say and what you want and the vision you have. So the way we're going to express that is this. right? When it's that way, the ownership, that aspect, now they're a part of that branding, which I think just entrenches even more the developmental side because now they have investment into it.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, you know this, like I'm a guy that, stuff matters. Like one of the things that I keep telling these guys is like, you can look pretty in the first half. Like 100% you can look pretty. Your towel can be perfect. That undershirt can be folded exactly how you need it. Your socks can have the perfect neck number of scrunches in them. Those cleats can be clean. But come the fourth quarter, you got to put that on the back burner because we're out here to break wills, right?
Yes.
And to me, that's the balance, right? Like, is my answer perfect? No, but I feel pretty confident in my answer that everything that we're doing right now is focused on the fourth quarter. And if you reach that expectation, I'll give you this in the first half.
Right.
And I mean, it's January, so I don't know if it's working. But I feel pretty confident that when it gets to August and September, we're going to start to resemble the type of team that the kids will feel good walking out there, and the coaches will feel great because of the product, the result, and the connection. So, I know there's a lot of different layers to that, and different things keep getting brought up. But I truly think that in this day and age of the game, and where they're trying to take the collegiate version and it's trickling down into high school, if you're not aware and cognizant of some of that stuff, you're going to get left behind. That's just my opinion. I could be completely wrong, but
no, sorry, there's like a rock on my shoe that keeps scratching the metal, and I hear it. The sad thing that I've been hearing, like there's I don't know if you can see in this office. I'll you see that little gap right there? Yeah, that's a wall that has no top to it. And so across from that wall is another room. So I remember when I first got here, quick funny story. When I first got here, mind you, it's just a wall that there is no top. So there's another room that there. So we'd be in that room and Dilfer would be like, hey, we need some privacy. Come over to this room over here. And so he'd bring people to this room and I'm in that room. I'm like, well, there's no top. So I can hear everything that you say. Like, it's
a loft apartment.
It's a third of a top of a wall. Like, you can hear everything you say. For the whole first year, it's like, hey, yeah, this is for our ears only. Let's go over here. Okay, I can hear everything. So, anyway, I say that to say, we have a lot of college coaches that stop by, and they all go to that room there. I can hear everything they say. And the number one thing that I've been hearing lately that's honestly sad is every one of them, because we are a unique situation. Like, you don't got to go check into the school. So every college coach that comes by, it's like they just kind of, they feel like more relaxed here because we're so apart from the school, and they walk in and there's college people working out, and it's just different. And they sit down and they're more open. And what I've heard a lot from these coaches is, man, unfortunately, like, we can't even have a relationship with these kids hardly anymore because of the NIL. And so at this point, it's just like, hey, there's not even a need for a relationship because I might not see you in 6 months. And because I am making a business decision and so are you with the money, there's no need for it anymore. Like, I've heard that probably, honestly, like 4 or 5 times over the last week and a half from P4 coaches. And it's like, God, that is so sad. And I get it, but it's also like I don't. You know what I mean? Like, I've been there and I experienced it at Vanderbilt. Like, it's hard because it's like you could be making this relationship and all of a sudden, boom, 2 weeks later, I don't want to say he stabbed you in the back, but he got more money from somewhere else and he left. And it's like, was that a waste? But to me, it's like, it's not a waste of relationship. Any relationship you have in life is meant for something. You were to, the inception of that relationship was supposed to be there. The universe made it happen, but not to get too deep with that. But I think that is sad. It's like these coaches feel it's like, you know what? Because we're paying you and because it's now legal, I don't need to have a relationship with you anymore.
It's business. It's not personal.
Right.
It's business. I know. Right. I had, and it's what I was going to say is it's worse at the G5 level, right? So I was talking to a coach who will remain nameless about similar issues. We were just kind of reflecting because I had a relationship with him before I got to Mount Vernon. So like he stopped by and we kind of did the whole, like, how the first couple of weeks been. And then I was like, man, how has it been there? Like, what are y'all, how's the offseason been? What's the turnover looking like? And he goes, here's what we know. He goes, and this is just analytical. He said, the way we have to perceive it because of the size of the school we are and the way everything is working now is that we have to operate under the assumption that top 15% productivity for us, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to bigger and better.
Yep.
But from our standpoint, bottom 15% of producers, they need to be gone so we can protect our brand.
Yep.
So at minimum, from not just like football season to football season, but at minimum from the end of football season to spring ball, we're going to see a 30% turnover on our roster. 30%.
Yeah.
And
that's a great point.
That's just the minimum, because then you got to think about the kid that did stay, that survived that first 30%. But because of that 15% they brought in, to replace, they outshine during the spring. And so he's going to leave. Or that guy that they brought in that it wasn't what he promised, or he underperformed and he's going to leave. So now from August to August, you're looking at like, in those middle tier schools, you're looking at like a 45 to 50% roster turnover from year to year.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, I said, you've lost all incentive to build a relationship.
Yep.
Like the profession as it sits has lost the incentive to do that. Right. And he reflected, he said, you're right, but that's still our job. And he's got an extensive kind of familial background. So like the relationship side is still very important. But, he expressed, I'm still going to try and do that, but it makes it harder because of that subconscious aspect. Like, this kid may not be here in 90 days. Right. Or it makes it harder because that kid may not be as accepting because he might be gone in 90 days.
Yes.
And I don't know what the answer is. And I don't know how you fix it. But what I do know is that over and over and over, college guys who have been career Division I coaches are sitting here like, this sucks. And they're taking high school jobs. Yep. And they're jumping ship because it's an environment that's not what they signed up for. Now, is the old way, was it better? Not saying that at all. Right. Both systems had major flaws. And you're not going to be able to rewind the tape or, put it back in, put the string back into the ball. But it is what it is, and you've got to find a way to change and alter to make it the best version it can be. But this game of college football versus the 2019 and really even the COVID year, that span, those are two completely different sports. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the best way to manage it.
Yeah. Well, we had a same guy that was in here the other day that was talking about, efforting his way to the top. We were talking about where he's currently at, which is, basically not a P4. And we were talking about, I was like, dude, you're going to have to, at that level, whether it's G5 or Division II, in their case, you're going to have to accept the fact that in your recruiting spill, you are telling those kids, hey, we want you to come here so we can develop you to leave. Like, and if you're not accepting that as a lower tier school, you're stupid. Because I think if you can do that, you're more apt to get those kids. Because like, hey, we're going to develop you. We're going to develop you so well that you're going to go get that $400,000 offer from Georgia. We don't want that. We would love for you to stay. But we know what today's world of football is, and we're okay with that. Rather than saying, you know what, no, we're going to keep these kids, and this ain't happening. Now, I say that, and then on the flip side, there was a college coach here, about an hour and a half from here, non-P4, and he had an offensive lineman that was offered $350,000 to leave to go to an SEC school. And he, in turn, turned it down, called his O-line coach, and was like, hey, I'd be stupid to leave the person that developed me to get this $350,000 offer I'm staying here for another year. We're going to win the conference championship, and then I'm going to the NFL. Now, I think that's probably 1 in 10 of every kid at the college level, unfortunately. But I say that to say, like, there are still those kids out there that have see the bigger picture and also realize, like, I don't need to go P4. I don't need to go to the SEC just to go to the NFL. If I have a solid coach that can make me better, I'm going to stay here. Now, would it have been hard to turn that at 350? For sure. But kudos to him.
In the conversations that it's like this world has led to existing, you used to hear whispers about like, oh, this and that, and like, oh, this team's breaking the rule, and this staff did this, and yada yada yada. What do you do? What do you do when a parent's like, what are you going to give me? I know what you're going to do to take care of my son, but I'm moving wherever he goes. Mm-hmm. And those like coaches have to be. You can't be like, that's not part of the agreement. You have to be willing to be like, well, we have this in place and this in place and this in place. And you're seeing the portal reward kids. It rewards the majority of the kids that get rewarded are because of productivity, but there's still a niche that are getting rewarded because of profile, what they were 18 months ago.
Right.
And there's got to be, a long time ago, I made a statement that when this was first starting to be discussed, like, cool, you want to open the portal? You want to open up NIL? Pick one. If you sign a multi-year deal, you stay multi-years. It's a contract. You breach the contract, then you have to sit out a year to transfer.
Yeah, that's starting to happen. There was a school here the other day. We were talking about their quarterback, and they put him on a 2-year contract with a third year optional to them. But the third year, if they get there, it's $12 million. It's like that. That's the direction. Yeah,
you have to. That's the only way that they can protect their investment.
That's right.
But
that's right.
Anybody that's pro athlete, which I am, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You're getting to right now, but it's going to go away, and you're going to have to accept that. Pick one. Do you want guaranteed NIL, or do you want free portal? You're going to have to negotiate those terms. If we give you a 4-year deal, you're here for 4 years, or you have to sit out a year to transfer.
Dude, yeah. You know what was interesting? A point one of these coaches made the other day. Dude, he was in here for like an hour and a half, feet up on the table, just talking about stuff. He was like, I'm actually waiting for the first, like when it's going to happen, but for the first college athlete to get in trouble for tax fraud. Because with all these kids transferring, if you're getting NIL in 3 different states, if you're not aware of how those states operate with your taxes, you're screwed. And I was like, dude, I didn't even think about that. What a great point. Like these kids, if they don't have help in that regard, like that's tough.
Yeah, because this whole revenue share ruling, which is insanity to me. I'm hearing stories of kids that, hey, we can offer you a scholarship, but if you take it, you won't get NIL this season. But if you take the NIL, then you're eligible for the profit sharing, but you'll have to still be considered a walk-on. And you're like, brother, what?
Yeah.
How? In what world does that make any sense? If he's good enough, give him both. Mm-hmm. But, nobody's going to pay more than they have to.
Right. That's right. It's interesting, and like how much of that money goes to the football, and they're trying to figure it all out as they go. It's not good.
It's a 5-year process minimum before this looks like anything that has. It's the Wild West right now, and those who can will, they'll buy the best roster they can, and compete for national title. I'm not pointing any fingers.
Yeah,
but until there's a reason, until there's regulations and rules in place, guardrails to put structure to this whole thing. This is the product that we said we wanted, that the general population said they wanted.